are Heather and Paul Christie.
And for over 12 years, we've worked with executives and entrepreneurs to accelerate change in every aspect of their business.
Because we are in the fastest paced business environment that anyone has ever seen before.
So join us for the Evolve to Win show. Thanks for joining us for another Evolve to Win show with Heather and Paul.
Hope your day is starting off great. We're talking today, we're in part 7, our final session or episode, I guess, on hidden motivators. And we're going to be talking today about power. And these hidden motivators, if you have watched any of our other sessions, they are what's beneath the surface and they are the why behind what we do. So it's what drives us to take action. And we call them hidden motivators because you can't see them and you don't really know that they're there unless you know. And as we go through and talk about each of these motivators, you will start to connect with some, and some you will connect with more strongly than others. So why is it important to know about hidden motivators?
Because if you know what your motivators are, you can help align yourself with the right job, the right career, the right relationship, and it really empowers you to be able to go after things that really inspire you.
Yeah. So I think that is a really big piece of why hidden motivators matter to us, because until you know what truly drives you to take action, then you can't line yourself up in the right way, right? So here's what's true. I've worked with executives before who were unaware of their hidden motivators. They were frustrated in their job. They thought it was the job. They thought it was the company. But it wasn't until they really started understanding themselves better and recognizing that they just weren't really lining themselves up with what drove them to take action.
Right.
So they started to also understand the flip side of that, which is we get frustrated in life when our motivators are not present. Well, we can't fulfill our motivators. So I think let's talk about this power motivator. So every motivator, all 7 motivators have a keyword. And the keyword for this one is power. I don't want you to worry so much about what we call the motivator or even what we call either side of the continuum. For this motivator, power, one side of the continuum is...
It's collaboration.
So Paul's going to play collaborative today, and the other side is commanding. Okay. And again, don't get too caught up on the adjectives that we're using to describe the continuum, but we want to let you know what they mean. So in terms of how we value power, we all value it and we value it differently. There's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad, but definitely different. So as a collaborative, how do you value power?
So a collaborative, and really I am this way in real life. So I'm just not playing the part. Collaborative is a person that really enjoys the supporting role. So I get a ton of value out of supporting somebody else. And not only do I enjoy that, but I do not want any fanfare or major type of recognition for the work that I do. So if I support somebody in a really great way, I don't need to be given an award or anything. What I feel really good internally about is for the person who I'm supporting to get a ton of recognition for themselves, because I know that feeds that person. Whereas for me, it's just not that important.
So being collaborative, this behind the scenes supportive player, is very different from the other side of the continuum, which is commanding. And as it sounds, commanding is more about I like to take control. And this actually is me in the real world as well. I really, really want to achieve. I want to win. I get so energized by coming up with winning strategies. And I do care about growth. I care about advancement. I care about elevating my career, this business, everything about it. And again, no right or wrong, but depending on where you sit in terms of this spectrum, you're either relating to one side or the other, or you might even push back against one side or the other.
So I want to show you Heather's display that we've created. So this is Heather's display, and the number 1, the very top motivator on there, is commanding. And not only is it a driving motivator for her, but she has an 89% on that. And if you can see on this display, there's a red line that's kind of marking that basically it's 7 out of 10 people, 68% of people fall within that red area. And then there's the mean score, which is the middle score, which is 50%. So on average, most people fall around 50%. Heather is 89% on that. So for her, that's a massive driver for her.
It's a huge driver.
Yeah.
It really is. It's what drives me primarily to do what I do. And the other thing about this motivator, it's a competitive motivator. And so if you know when it comes to, well, it's not just work, it's everywhere in your world. If you're trying to win and trying to achieve, if you're massively oriented towards goals and achieving goals, you would likely fall on the commanding side. Okay, so imagine this scenario too. I'm going to give some real life practical examples so people can really feel what side or the other. Let's say you're sitting in the meeting. Do you want to just participate in the meeting and sort of sit back and listen to others and, hear what other people have to say? Or would you much prefer to run the meeting? Now, depending on how strong that feeling is, you know what side of the spectrum you're on. If you would rather truly be a participant and sort of on the sidelines and not even really participate and maybe listen more, you might be highly on the collaborative side. Whereas if you are sitting in a meeting and you're not running the meeting and it's like making your skin itch, then you're probably more on the commanding side of the spectrum, right? So talk about, is there anything else that you can think about in terms of real life practical examples of how your commanding motivator actually drives you to take action?
You mean the collaborative?
The collaborative. Did I say commanding? You know why?
So one of the things I find interesting about this particular motivator is that in the real world, especially at work, there are leaders that will try and recognize, people people who are collaborative and recognize them and want to bring them out in front of everybody and be like, hey, we're giving an award to Paul here, and can everybody stand up, and he did such a great job. And I'm just like, that to me, that it just doesn't come off that well for me. I don't take recognition that way. I would prefer that the leader would just bring me in the office and say, hey, I just want to tell you, you're just doing a great job. You're working with the team. The team is doing unbelievable, and you're leading them and you're supporting them in a way. And what I get out of it is watching other people get the recognition. So I think what happens in a lot of cases, especially in work, is that when you have a commanding leader, they think that everybody wants to be recognized. And so it's a real issue, because you've seen many times, I'm sure, people being recognized that really don't want to be recognized at all.
Yeah. It's actually a demotivator.
Yeah,
right?
It really is.
The more collaborative you are, to be pulled up on stage especially, or pulled up in front of all your teammates and given the spotlight, that's what the collaborative driver wants to avoid. They do not want the spotlight. They do not want to be out in front. And so just recognize, if you are a leader who's made that mistake before, really take a look and understand who's who on the team. Whereas someone who's on the commanding side, not only are they okay receiving that recognition, it's part of what drives them. So think about this. If I'm in a situation where I don't have the ability to win or achieve or advance, it's a huge stressor for me. Mm-hmm. And if I don't have the ability to be recognized for winning, I've lost some of that driver. Does that make sense? So it's not, I don't do it because I want the look at me. That's really not it. It's that driver of the achievement. I want to have a goal out there that I can win. If I don't have a goal that I'm excited about winning, that's like the biggest demotivator you can imagine for me.
Yeah, and I think about this in a sales role. So people that have, certainly a salesperson, there's plenty of great salespeople out there that are all different types of motivators, all different types of behaviors as well. But I think when you think about in general, a good salesperson, they usually want to be recognized. They usually want that status. They usually want to be able to go after something, attack, and then be recognized for it. Whereas if you don't have that, if you're more collaborative, you're going to be wanting to work with other salespeople or with your staff and trying to put together a, it generally isn't a great, depending on the type of sales that you're doing, it isn't necessarily
inside
sales. It's great. Perfect.
Yeah.
But outside sales, like having to go out and find business, you want to have somebody that's probably a little bit more commanding, and where you can say, hey, we have this this goal and we have this prize for you, and go out and get it,
because the commanding person also tends to be independent and take control and drive, right? Where if something needs to be done, they're likely to just jump in and do it themselves, right? Versus try to figure out how to distribute that power within the team, which is what the collaborative person would do. And I was just going to say, this is a perfect example, is the leaderboard. Okay, so if you've ever been in a sales organization where they've actually started ranking the salespeople, it is one of the best drivers for someone who's commanding, and one of the
total demotivator
for collaborative. And what's really interesting is we were working with a client where the head of sales was actually collaborative. So he was a collaborative sales leader, which is great. I mean, you can lead from either side of the spectrum. Totally. You just lead in different ways, right? So this collaborative leader was giving pushback on doing a leaderboard. He's like, oh, that's going to make some people just feel way too uncomfortable. And we're like, okay, but the people who are commanding, which is a larger percentage of your sales staff by a lot, are not motivated unless they have a rank to jump. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So you really, again, what does it come down to? It comes down to knowing who's on your team, knowing how they're motivated, and making sure that you're helping to line them up with success. Because the best way that we can help people be successful is to really focus on their strength zone, which is, what are you motivated by? Let me set your environment up to make sure that your motivators are present for you all the time.
Yeah. And so, a lot of people find their jobs, their careers, they go into, a particular industry because their behavioral styles aligned with the particular job. So, like in general, you would see like a higher C go into an accounting position or engineering position. And that's great.
Which is someone who's very analytical.
And that's more of the outward, how you would see somebody. But when the question always is that we get is always about, how do we motivate our people? Can you motivate people? Well, you can't motivate people who are completely just disengaged. I mean, they're out. But if you really do want to motivate people, you have to align them with the job and the role that is perfect for them. And most of the time, they have no idea what that is because they don't understand what they're motivated by. They kind of do, but they can't tell you. It's not on a piece of paper like this where you can see what motivates me and compared to what motivates Heather. Heather and I are completely differently motivated. Well, we do have some similar, but we're very much different in certain ways. I am set up for a much different job role than Heather is, and vice versa. So but
you know what? Think about this. There were a lot of years where we did not know about motivators. We didn't use them in our company. We didn't use them for our clients. We just didn't know about them and the value. And for a long time in this business, you were feeling like you needed to be doing more. Like maybe you should be out on stage instead of having me do it, or you should be doing more of the sales. You kept feeling like it wasn't the right fit, right? But what's true is the things that you do in a supporting role are truly what feed you. Right? So he did. Paul got out on stage and he started doing more of the commanding type of role, and it was exhausting for you, wasn't it? So
yeah, it's just not aligned with who I am. I mean, I certainly can do it, but it doesn't generate the enthusiasm and the energy for me. It drains a lot out of me. So it takes a lot to do that. And I think that is for most people. And I think, like they always say, if your motivators and your behavioral style is aligned with the job that you're doing, man, you are just on top of the world. You feel energetic. You feel great. So if you're in a position right now where you're not feeling like that motivated, or that, you may want to take a look at, the job role that you're in. Is it aligned with your motivators and behavioral styles?
And if you don't know what your motivators are and you really want to know what your motivators are, please reach out to us. You can email paul@evolveglobal.com, and he can help you with an assessment that will give you the same kind of chart that we just showed you for ourselves, along with an extensive report. The other thing is too, I think what happens is when we're aligned with our motivators, when we are really hitting on all the motivators, remember, it's what drives us to take action. So if you're in a role, for me, if I'm commanding, I have to have a certain amount of control. I have to have a certain amount of ability to advance. I also have to have a certain amount of personal freedom. So for any of you who really, really struggle because you have maybe a boss who feels too controlling, or you just don't feel like you have the ability to do the things that you want to do without someone else getting in the way and making decisions for you, you're likely commanding. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to leave your company or leave your role. Part of it's just awareness, and also sharing it with the people who you work with, the people who you work for. So it's a huge opportunity just in terms of just feeling really good about what you do.
Yeah. And so Joe has had a question. He says, does a sales leaderboard work with smaller teams? And so I would say on that, I think what's really important is, if you're building a sales team, that you understand the type of person that you want to have. So if I was building a sales team from scratch, I would make sure, if I wanted to have, because it's an outside sales force and they have to go out and find new business, I'd want them to be higher commanding. So the best thing to do to answer that question is to assess your team, find out who's commanding, who's not, who's collaborative, where they all are, because you may find that that leaderboard, even with a smaller team, can demotivate one of the people and they just bug out. For the commanding person, it might be great. So you may want to build a team with all commanding motivators, and then you can run that leaderboard, put out prizes, put out incentives, and all that, really to drive that team. And I think it's really important as you're building a sales team to really understand, what do you want in a salesperson?
Yeah, so I think that's a great way of answering that question. And think about this, Joe. If you do have that collaborative person on your team and you do a sales leaderboard, it would be really valuable that you acknowledge that person is collaborative and let them know how they might be feeling about that leaderboard, because it's such a demotivator that the more collaborative you are, the further you are on that spectrum, it actually can demotivate them, because remember, the collaborative does not want to be in that top position. So in the event you have a collaborative salesperson and they are doing really well and they're in that top position, you do a leaderboard, you know what they're going to do immediately? They're going to just kind of nudge down, because they want other people to win. So I think it's important to know the makeup of your team when it's a small team. But yeah, I think in sales organizations in general, you have two likely motivators. You have the commanding, mm-hmm. and usually you also have the resourceful, mm-hmm. right? So yep. The resourceful, if you remember, is the one that they're just all about ROI, return on everything. And so with those two combined, that sales leaderboard works magic. Commission structures work magic. Incentives work magic. But again, on the other side of the spectrum, incentives don't work. Commissions don't work if you've got someone who's more collaborative.
So next week, for our Facebook Live and podcast, Heather is going to debrief me.
Oh.
And so you can see how a debrief works. So if you do want to get an assessment done for your team, you want to know how, not only the report is great, but it's awesome to have somebody debrief, because it really brings to life. She's able to ask questions. We're able to really dig in deeper to exactly what your role is, what are the motivators? How are your behavioral styles working with your motivators? And it's just, they're really good. We do those for our clients, a ton of them, and they're hugely beneficial. So we want to show you how those work.
Yeah. And that's exciting. You just came up with that on the spot. I didn't know that's what we're doing, but I think it's going to be great. So again, just to recap, the motivator is called power. You're either on the collaborative end of the spectrum, which means that you tend to be a behind the scenes type of person, just really wanting to work with the team. Or you tend to be on the commanding side, where you really want to drive. You want to drive for the results. You want to control, the ability to advance, the ability to achieve, the ability to win. And maybe you're somewhere in between, and it depends on the situation. So hope that was helpful for you. And if you haven't connected with us yet, please go to heatherchristie.com, where you can sign up for our leadership list. And until then, have a great day.
Thanks for watching and listening.